Hey, so in this episode, we're going to refer to like this episode getting an 8.0 on IMDb. That's not true. So every time we say that, we were misinformed.
Welcome to episode 20 of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men the Animated Series weekly recap podcast. I'm JC, and we're recording this on Free Comic Book Day to date the episode.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of, a little shout out to Eric and Rebecca. Eric notified us that the X-Men episodes on Disney Plus were randomly disappearing and reappearing.
So when I went home to Connecticut for a trip, I literally brought my 5 DVD sets of the show back with me to LA.
Which will probably come in handy. And his wife, Rebecca, who actually asked me if I was going to Free Comic Book Day. And I was like, I don't know if it's happening here because I'm supposed to be recording the podcast with John tomorrow, and I don't think he would miss Free Comic Book Day.
I mean, you can only do so much at one store during Free Comic Book Day.
And then this morning you texted me like, hey, I'm going to hit up Free Comic Book Day. So I messaged Rebecca back. I was like, oh, I guess you were right.
Yep. And shout out to our friends of the podcast, Golden Apple Comics, who did an awesome Free Comic Book Day thing. A bunch of free comic books.
Oh, did they just had like random smash? I don't know how that works.
No, for those of you who don't know, and obviously we're about a month after this has happened, so be prepared for May of next year. All of the publishers send mini issues of different comic book stories. So like Marvel sends a Spider-Man book and an Avengers book usually. DC has 1 or 2 books. There was a Pokemon book this year. There was Scrooge McDuck this year. Last year I got one for Gloomhaven, which is a tabletop game. So there's like tons and tons of different stuff.
It's good, whatever they want to promote.
Yeah, it's like what do they have coming up in the next year? And I want to say it was Blackest Night issue 0, which was like a huge story for Green Lantern in 2009. Issue 0 was a Free Comic Book Day book.
Oh, wow. Okay. No. It kind of reminds me, it sounds like a lot like Record Store Day, or how it used to be.
Yeah, I've never been to that one. So
back in the day, Record Store Day was like when indie record stores would have cool exclusives, like the Foo Fighters would release something separate from their label that was like a show they did in someone's garage on the vinyl. Now it's completely different. It's been totally taken over by corporate America. Like Taylor Swift released a vinyl on that day, so it's just like nothing like it was before, but it sounds very similar. It sounds like a lot of fun. And I'm Rod.
That was our best opening tangent ever.
Yeah. I'm a musician, and as of recording this, we've both seen Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. This is the opening weekend, but hopefully won't be spoilers for you because it's been a month, I think, by the time you hear this. But we'll warn you about spoilers if we happen to dive into anything tangentially, because minor spoiler, there will be a couple tangent points that connect with that movie to what we're talking about here. Speaking of, Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series where we're going back and watching every single episode of the original 1992 X-Men, the animated series in the original intended script order, building up to the release of X-Men 97 coming in Disney Plus in 2023.
Some quick reminders. We are a recap show of a series that came out 28 years ago. I have to change that in the script. And there will be spoilers, like Rob was saying. If you don't want it spoiled for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode, and come back. Hopefully you can find the episode. One thing we did find out is if it is not on Disney Plus, all the episodes are for sale on Amazon. You could buy them at one-off episodes. So at the time we looked, I think it was like 20 episodes were missing. So it's like a $40 investment-ish.
Yeah. But then they just start reappearing.
Yeah, they start reappearing. So who knows at this point what's happening in real life. But we will do our best to avoid mentioning anything about future episodes that we have not covered yet. And if you can't tell by how we're talking about Disney and Disney Plus and episodes disappearing, we are not affiliated with or sponsored by them in any way, shape, or form. And after today, probably not going to be.
Yeah. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. And of course, make sure to follow us on all your favorite podcast services. Finally, we're recording these episodes in batches right now, so if we're reacting to any news about the upcoming series, we'll be a few weeks behind, like the Doctor Strange stuff, which that actually works out, so you don't have to worry about tuning in and being like, oh, I haven't seen it yet because I only saw it on the 3rd day when it was released. Like, you have a month now. You're in safe territory. We can all geek out or complain together.
But we'll give warnings just in case. Yeah. But on to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about Season 2, Episode 11, titled Mojovision. It aired on February 5th of 1994. It currently sits at a 8.4 star rating on IMDb. Rod, this is one of the highest star ratings of the series so far.
I wish you could just see my face. I'm seeing this for the first time, like in real life right now, that star rating.
Oh yeah, I make notes and don't tell Rod about it until we get into the actual episode.
Okay, this was fun, but it's just not I don't think that this is that great of an episode.
I don't know how star ratings work on IMDb. I'm assuming it's just people voting.
It wasn't bad.
People really like Longshot and Mojo. I don't know.
Maybe.
No.
Or maybe that's the meta joke because the whole show is about rating. The episode's about ratings.
People on IMDb are not that clever to get into the meta about ratings. Let's be real. So let's kick it off. It starts out with the character Longshot. And Rod, I love to play this game. What do you know about Longshot aside from what we saw in the episode?
Nothing. I remember the action figure and I forgot his name until they said it. But I did remember him because I had the action figure when I was a kid.
And what is the defining feature about Longshot aside from his blonde mullet?
My note literally says, I don't know this mullet.
I can vouch. His note actually says that. So Longshot, because he is a being from an alternate dimension, actually only has 4 fingers per hand.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
I don't actually know if they addressed it in the animation, but that is a comic canon thing for Longshot.
That's funny because the way they portrayed him in this, he's supposed to be like super sexy, action star. And like, okay.
I mean, he's still a good looking dude.
Yeah,
just by having a lack of a pinky or whatever doesn't make him not good looking, Rod. But it starts off with this character, Longshot, and he's fighting these brown flying monsters. They look like they are inspired by the Brood, but they are not as... They're a little more generic, like alien shape. They don't actually feel like the Brood all the way to me.
Which kind of tracks because if we find out more, this is a show and stuff, so it might just be like a copycat from something, from the actual Brood thing or whatever. Also, I love the soundtrack in this because it's 1,000% Ron.
Yeah,
Ron Wasserman. It's just like this glam metal, like chase music.
It was very like 80s, 90s inspired. No doubt. So Longshot hops into a car and there's like a whole chase scene. And then they're like transitioning to being underwater. There's more of a chase scene. It has this like high energy movie trailer vibe to it. Yeah. And then we see 2 cameos of characters from within the Marvel/X-Men universe in that opening montage. Who are those 2 characters, Rod?
I did not recognize them.
So one was Psylocke, everybody's favorite ninja.
Wait. So I didn't see her.
You didn't see her because she was definitely in it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yep. I just missed it.
And then there was a green robot who was punching over Longshot. That was Super Adaptoid, who we talked about in a previous episode.
Okay.
Yep.
I think he kind of blended into the background for me.
I mean, I think you need to not binge these episodes like in the 2.5 hours before you come over to record.
But also, Mike, if this one and the next 2 seem a little weird for me more than usual, is because I just inadvertently saw Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness 3 times in 24 hours because I overcommitted myself to friend groups. So I was a little fatigued.
And when he told me this, my reaction is, yes, it's a good movie. It is not 3 times in that rapid succession good.
Out of experience, I can tell you that's 100% true. It was great for 2 viewings. Just stop.
So from those shots, we cut to Mojo, who's freaking out to his Major Domo. How would you describe Mojo?
I think he's super campy. I love how silly he is because one of the things about Marvel that kind of separates it from DC, at least in my experience, is that they're not afraid to have a little humor and not take themselves too seriously. So I love that it feels like the writers were like venting their frustrations with the Hollywood producers in Mojo.
Yeah, so from a physical perspective, Mojo is this giant blob with a literally kind of like a walking pedestal that he's planted into, and he's just grotesquely overweight. He has these little metal pieces that force his eyes to stay open. Think like, what is it? Clockwork Orange style. Yeah. And he talks like every shitty, stereotypical Hollywood agent that you've seen in any movie. And we can say we've seen some of those people talk in real life like that because LA.
I love the implication that he can't even be bothered to hold his own eyes open.
No, it's more that he doesn't want to miss anything because he doesn't want to blink.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it could be that too.
He comes across to me as like Jabba the Hutt's like eccentric flamboyant cousin.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. So he is freaking out and he's yelling at Longshot. Longshot has these 2 women with him. One's like a makeup artist. The one who's the makeup artist, did you recognize that character model?
No.
So the character model is definitely that early 90s Dazzler that you would have seen in the X-Men arcade cabinet.
Okay.
That was that design of Dazzler.
Oh, from the Pride of the X-Men.
Right.
Okay.
I literally have it as POX Dazzler written down.
It was supposed to be Dazzler, though? Or they just kind of used her form?
So they don't ever call her Dazzler in it. And it's, as far as we've gotten into the show, Dazzler has never been addressed as a character. Yeah. But it is 100% the Dazzler design.
That's funny. They needed something to fill the space.
I mean, it's better than the random green guy from the intro, who we still don't know who he is.
I love that Mojo gets so flustered, he like pulls out his own nose hairs.
Yeah, he starts pulling out his own nose hairs and insulting Longshot, basically being like, yeah, this has more talent than you do.
Yeah.
And Longshot's kind of over it. He's like, fine, replace me, see if I care. And then to your point of like how much camp is in this episode, Mojo pulls out the not Pepto-Bismol bottle.
I couldn't read the bottle.
I couldn't read it.
It said Mojo something, and
it was probably like Mojo-Bismol or something like that.
Yeah, but I couldn't make out the bottom letters.
Yeah, but he starts chugging it like it's, a beer essentially.
Does his assistant have a name? Because I just wrote him down.
The Major Domo.
Oh, that's Major Domo. Yep. Okay, I started taking notes of what he calls Mojo, and so far at this point, he calls him "Oh Bulbous One," and then I think after he hands him the Pepto, he calls him "Most Congealed Master."
Yeah. They have a great relationship. Because honestly, you would think for as powerful as Mojo seems to be, that would be a thing to kill somebody over, but he gets away with it.
Like, those two kind of seem like just the way that Mojo presents himself. Like, okay, maybe that's a compliment to him, but as we go along, there's a few other ones that are kind of more questionable.
Right. So as Longshot has left and Mojo is worried about how to save his media empire, they come up with the idea of, well, we're going to use these people from this backwater dimension. And we see a montage of action shots, including the introduction to the show for the X-Men.
I was like, is their theme song canon in real life in their universe? Because it was playing
in the Mojo aspect of the universe, yes. And so I don't think they know they have a theme song, but Mojo perceiving them does.
Also, I don't know what technology was available then, because I was like maybe 10 or 11 when the show came out.
Right.
But I think they pulled out a DVD of the X-Men, because they pull a disc out. And that wasn't super common then. Because Major Domo pulls out a disc and he's like, let's watch this, and he puts it in the computer. I was like, wow, they pulled a CD out or DVD looking thing.
It was a mini laser disc. That's the only theory I have.
And I was super impressed it wasn't a floppy disk.
Right.
They popped it in. I was like, wow, they just popped a DVD of the X-Men.
Nope, mini laser disc. I don't know if DVD was even a coined term when this show originally came out.
If it was, it wasn't common, because I remember my high school job in 1999. It was such a big deal to have DVDs in store. I worked at the electronics department in Walmart, and we had a wall, quote unquote, of DVDs, and there were maybe 9 or 10 DVDs on that wall you could buy for $35 a piece.
Right.
And it was like Prince of Egypt and like maybe The Matrix.
I remember one of my early DVDs, which is a movie that did not need to be a DVD, was Goodfellas, and it was when DVDs were not even able to store the entire movie on one side. So it was a double-sided DVD that I'd had to switch halfway through the movie.
Yeah.
We're just revealing our age. But Mojo ends it by seeing the potential of the X-Men and says, well, Mojo can make a star out of anyone. So we cut to the real world, or the Earth. X-Men's world, where Cyclops and Jean are buying a TV and talking about how advanced the disc was. We cut to the opposite side of that, where they're talking about how the TV has 1,300 scan lines.
I was going to say, that shows our age, is that, man.
Scan lines, literally,
instead of pixels.
Yep.
I had genuinely forgotten that was the resolution, like, of that time period. But then Cyclops brings something up that I don't think was a thing even at that time or now. He asks if the TV itself has surge protection. I was like, the TV wouldn't.
Right. No. You usually plug your. I can't see a TV having that. We could be wrong. I'm not going to research it.
I'm not an engineer or whatever, or an inventor or something. So like, if you know about that, maybe it does have a built-in. I'm not sure, especially a CRT TV.
I don't know,
because it's just a giant tube with a bunch of explosives in it.
Yeah, but basically, he is making comment that there was an unfortunate accident because TVs just seem to explode in their house, in their mansion.
They made a quick reference to Jubilee, but the TV salesman is just like, what?
The TV salesman does not care. He's just like, I don't know, I'll check in the back or something like that. At that point, Mojo pops on and he begins talking like that stereotypical agent producer like we've mentioned, and essentially acts as though the deal's already closed. Like he's offering, but not really offering a choice in the matter of it.
That's also super accurate.
The one thing I did love is, hearing about contracts, we always hear things like non-disclosure, non-compete, exclusivity, all those phrases. Those are pretty common ones we hear. But Mojo drops in the non-survival clause.
I heard that, but I didn't catch it. Oh, yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. So he pretty much snaps when Jean and Scott are just like, no, like, fuck off, weirdo.
I love my note says Cyclops is confused, so he defaults to yelling.
You have the best notes when it comes to Cyclops, Rod.
Yeah, so Cyclops declines. Mojo is offended by it. He zaps Scott like through the TV.
Yeah.
Like not into the TV, but like the TV emits something to zap Scott.
Right. And then he proceeds to yell at Scott, calling him One Eye, which at least better than when Blob called him Four Eyes, which made no sense. And then Cyclops reacts by shooting a bunch of this poor guy's TVs in his store.
Yeah.
Because Mojo's popping up all over the place. Wolverine pops in along with Storm and Beast. And that was when Spiral appears. And Rod, what were your thoughts on Spiral?
I like Spiral. So I actually knew her first. Well, I probably saw her in this, but didn't think anything of her because they kind of made her a side character in this episode. I really know her from the Children of the Atom video game.
Right.
And so I had a much more badass impression of her than this show gave her.
Right. So for those of you who are listening without watching the show first, Spiral is a woman from Mojo's dimension. Yeah. She has extra arms and
kind of like vaguely samurai themed.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a samurai vibe to her. The motion that she takes, and this actually carried over to that Children of the Atom fighting game that you're referring to. It's not like capoeira, like dance fighting, but she is almost taking like ballet style movements with her combat.
Yeah, so, a lot of twirling and stuff.
Right. But she also apparently has the ability to teleport people. So when she shoots all the X-Men, it teleports them out. And then she essentially walks back through the TVs back to Mojo's world. So we come back from the commercial break and you see a mountain with Mojo's face in it. And the entranceway was kind of weird. It was just like this big area like filled with light.
Yeah.
And we assume like this is where the live studio audience must be. And
I didn't recognize anyone in the audience. Were we supposed to?
So there are two characters in the audience that are Marvel related that you would know.
Okay.
And then there are a few that are not at all. Like they're like Easter eggy type people, but there are two.
Okay.
So first one, you see the back of their head early in the episode, and then later you see the front of them. There is a Skrull, and it is the classic version of the Skrull. Okay. The one that I didn't think you were going to get is Awesome Android, which is a giant robot with kind of just like this huge brick rectangle head, and he's kind of just, he looks like a lump of clay. Like there's no nicer way to say it, but those were the ones that were purposefully put there. And then I have notes later, I'll find them. Oh yeah. Faces in the crowd, Scott Lobdell, who's an X-Men writer, Mark Silvestri, who is an artist, Tom DeFalco, who is the editor of X-Men at the time, and there's also somebody who looks a little bit like Jack Kirby. Most of the first three were like their faces on an alien body.
Yeah.
Whereas the one that was Kirby is the one that just kind of is the lone human in the batch. But
that makes sense.
Those were more Easter eggy, not necessarily people you would recognize just as a Marvel fan at the time.
That makes more sense because when they panned over the crowd, it was just long enough. I was like, I think I'm supposed to notice something here, but then I didn't recognize anybody.
Yeah, I'll throw it on Instagram, and I love saying that because it gives me an excuse to put midweek post.
Yeah.
The shot of Awesome Android and the Skrull, just so you could see where those popped up. So we have Spiral in the control booth. And then in front of Mojo, the X-Men are in this like weird cylinder thing.
Yeah.
Like cylinder crystal, for lack of a better term.
And they get transformed like into their costumes.
They basically take them out of their street clothes because unlike some of our other episodes, nobody was wearing their costume to the mall.
Around this time, we get more comments from Major Domo. He calls Mojo "Oh depraved omelet," which is the one I thought would have been offensive, but also that's confusing. What?
I'm not going to dig into it, Rod.
And I even made sure to double check the caption to make sure I heard it right. And it says, "Oh, depraved omelet."
Like omelet, like eggs?
Like an egg omelet.
Okay.
Yeah. And then soon after that, he calls him, "Oh, corrupter of crania."
I mean, that's pretty accurate.
Crania, I'm guessing, is a comic reference.
No, like crania, like people's brains.
Oh, okay. It was like literal. Okay.
Like literally you're melting people's brains by putting garbage TV up.
Yeah, but the depraved omelet thing, I might keep that in the back pocket. Just to throw out when somebody really pisses you off.
Yeah. That's fair. They make sure to take a little bit of time and talk trash against Longshot. They call him an ungrateful has-been. Beast decides to say the whole, like, you know, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, as seems evident here. And Mojo just kind of like blows it off. He's like, does not care about it. It's like I don't know if he's oblivious to the fact that Beast is talking shit on him, or he just really doesn't care that Beast is talking shit on him.
I kind of got the impression that he's been through this thing so many times. He's like, yeah, whatever, they all say this.
But you got to feel like Longshot was at least embracing his whole like stardom, whereas the X-Men are just like, we don't want to do your crap. Then Mojo gives a little bit of a speech of, you know, there are trillions of people watching, and what do they want? Do they want peace? Do they want freedom? Do they want good government? No, they want blood, guts, love, hate, entertainment, and action.
Which, before a couple years ago, I would have, you know, argued with. But I'm like,
no, this is pretty accurate.
He's
right?
He's pretty accurate.
Yeah. Maybe that's why it has such a high star rating, because they literally predicted stuff from 30 years ago.
Lord.
It's sad. So obviously the X-Men keep refusing, and then I believe Mojo refers to them as performing cattle.
Yeah, it's funny. I also love the little cutaway to Spiral running all the camera switching, because once again, my vision of her is the badass in Children of the Atom, and then she's essentially just like a associate producer on this. I would say she's the director.
Yeah, like, I mean, she's literally like, she doesn't have a control truck where she's like calling the shot changes, but she's doing everything.
The only reason she's not calling is because all her arms are doing all the things.
Yeah, she doesn't need a staff. She's super efficient.
Yeah.
So Mojo decides to kick stuff off and transport Cyclops and Storm into Miami Mutants. What were your initial thoughts on Miami Mutants, Rod?
I had a very, very short Miami Vice like fan stint. I don't even really know the story that much. I just thought the show was funny. I was like, all right, we're in the 90s, because I don't know would anybody now understand what that reference is?
I don't know, because wait, wasn't there like a new Miami Vice? That was Hawaii 5-0.
I think there was a Miami Vice revival, but I don't think it was very well
successful.
Known. Yeah, but it hit. I feel like it hit the parody like right on the head, like, because they were in the speedboat.
Yeah, they were in a speedboat, and then transitioned into like helicopters chasing the boat as it took off out of the water.
But then the boat turns into a jet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love Cyclops's and Storm's reactions when it like cuts to them in the boat, though.
Oh, and Storm just goes, how did we get here?
Yeah, she's like, what's going on? Their expressions reminded me of like when I have to take my cat to the vet or something, or put her in the car. And so I just like plop her in the car, and she looks around and she's like, where the fuck am I? It's got the same vibe from Storm. She's like, what? There's the what?
Yep. So we get a quick action scene that it's very quick cuts and stuff like that, but there's not a lot to really talk about other than it's, if you know Miami Vice, it's a really good homage to it with a little bit of advanced tech behind it, but there's not a ton of substance behind it, which I think is the point of it.
Yeah, they start winning. I feel like, like Storm starts taking out things because, different from Miami Vice, there's two superpowered people here.
Yeah.
But Cyclops kind of inexplicably just like taps out. I guess he gets tired. I'd never seen him get exhausted from using his lasers before.
He was just kind of shooting it nonstop, I guess.
Yeah, so he passes out, and then right before, and the Storm's in there, and right before the jet boat thing crashes, like it flashes back to the Mojo world or whatever.
Right, so they're back in the studio, and there are these, for lack of a better term, cells. Like they're just like kind of like crystal,
like planes.
Yeah,
kind of like Superman. Is that?
Yeah, it has a little bit of a Superman vibe to it. Yeah. And they put Scott and Storm in those, and Mojo acknowledges, oh, well, this got great ratings, so I guess we're going to let them live. And then there was a mention of the control room.
Yeah.
There were Mojo's yelling up to Spiral, and Longshot kind of gets like the light bulb moment above his head.
I also love when they cut to the control room, once again, like just building on Spiral's depiction in this. She's sitting there like filing her nails, like she's so bored. Yeah,
like she has her like feet up on the controls and stuff. She could give less of a shit about this. So then we teleport Rogue and Beast in to Rogue Star, which, okay, I'm not a Star Trek person. Like, when the fandom breakdown happens, I am Star Wars, even if I'm TBD on a lot of recent Star Wars. Yeah. But there's a character in Star Trek named McCoy.
Yeah. So I didn't think about that.
So did they do that just for the McCoy joke?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Maybe.
I mean,
Let's just say.
Yeah, let's go with yes.
Because otherwise, it doesn't make any sense to send those two. I guess it doesn't make any sense to send Cyclops and Storm to Miami Vice.
Yeah, the only one that actually makes sense from a pairing scenario is the next one. But there's a dogfight in space, and then we definitely have the Brood, and they're drawn slightly different than the ones that were introduced at the beginning of the episode. Brood are a longtime nemesis to the X-Men. They're an alien species. We don't see any of their actual powers other than they're creepy aliens here.
And they're a little bit smarter than the aliens we saw at the beginning.
Yeah, they definitely have a little more of a tactic to the way they're fighting. And this one doesn't end up as good as the first one. Beast essentially gets sucked out into space.
Yeah, because the Brood thing, even though they seem like just like generic monsters or whatever, like they actually tap the airlock to open it.
Right. And then Beast gets sucked into space, and Rogue is piloting the ship straight into a sun.
So, funny detail about the sun thing: when the ship crashes into the sun, you see a crash, like it crashed into like ground. But it was the sun. I don't know. It's a nitpicky thing, but it was just a funny. It made me laugh at the moment. I was like, did she just into the surface of a flame?
She did. It was set dressing, Rod. I don't know what to tell you. That results in Rogue and Beast popping up on those similar screen cells, whatever the hell we want to call them. And then Wolverine and Jean get transported into I Dream of Jean. And I was very confused. Aside from the name, what's happening on the screen has nothing to do with I Dream of Jeannie.
Yeah, it seemed a little more, if anything, a little bit more of like a Adam West Batman parody, because it starts with Wolverine scaling that wall. You know?
Yeah, Wolverine is scaling the wall and Jean is up on top. And then the piece that was a little odd to me is they have these robots that are there and fighting them. And instead of just being whoever the antagonists are, they showed the robots first. And then the first one, who Jean is on top of the building with, turns into the Punisher.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty obvious Punisher. But then inside the building, there are 3 more of these robots. And we're going to play the best game ever, Rod. Who do these 3 robots turn into? And I will give you credit for a team name or any of the 3 names of those characters.
I only know one.
Okay.
And it's Gladiator.
Right. So purple guy, Mohawk, that's Gladiator.
And I can't remember why I know him. Were there, if there were toys, I didn't have it, or maybe I saw it. I just, for whatever reason, he came up there, was like, oh, it's Gladiator. That's cool.
You know that because there was a post from the people that made the toys that made us the other day where they were showing the toys, and I tagged you in the post.
Oh, you know what's funny? The post you tagged me in, I think I actually posted on our stories a few days before.
Yeah. Yeah, we do that because we don't communicate. But going through the toys, it was like, well, it was essentially, can you name all these X-Men? The last one was Gladiator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, actually, now we say that with the Toy Biz toys, I can picture the package of the toy in my head, so I definitely softened. I never owned it, but that's where I know it from.
So the other 2 that you do see pop up are also members of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, which has never been addressed so far in the show, but they are Marvel Universe characters who interact with the X-Men. You have Earthquake, who is this gray alien-looking guy, and then you have Flashfire, who... From my reading of X-Men, I've seen more Flashfire than I have of Earthquake, for what that's worth. I did really appreciate that there was comment about it being an educational show.
I Dream of Jeannie?
Yeah, I Dream of Jean specifically. Yeah. So as they're fighting and such, Jean says, you know, what is TV if not electronic images created by machines?
Yes, thank you for describing how technology works.
She does, but then she decides to use her psychokinetic energy, and that was one of the ones that threw me off because I've heard, you know, they always refer to it as telekinetic energy, or the fact that she's psychic. I've never heard, at least maybe it just is how they referred to it pre the animated series, but I never heard psychokinetic being the way to talk about what Jean is able to do.
This moment I didn't remember before watching this, and it kind of reminds me of the convolutedness of how some things will get in the 5th season, the final season. So to me, this didn't read. I don't have. I'm glad that you're saying that it didn't have any. It wasn't out. It didn't exist outside of the show, because it doesn't make sense to me in the context of Jean's powers.
Right.
Of like why she's in super exposition mode. Like, who are you talking to?
I have to give her. She's probably talking to Wolverine.
Yeah. Well, the whole show though is this. Everybody's in exposition mode, which
it's the show being meta to itself.
And this is not a spoiler for Doctor Strange, but just like a comment on it. One of the things that I had to accept with the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is that they kind of embrace the campiness of stuff.
Well, it's Sam Raimi, so.
And so all of the characters are in full exposition mode in that movie. So anytime something's happening, someone's explaining something that everyone in the room already knows. And that's kind of the case here, is like Jean is saying it as if everybody knew all these pieces. But I was like, yeah, I wasn't going to make that leap that you could... That was what your power was called. But
so using her telekinetic powers, because I refuse to call it psychokinetic powers, she starts disrupting the feed and everything like that. And there's the freak out of cut to commercial. And we see the live audience has pulled out books, which... Again, to your point about the camp of this episode, it's so, like, Mojo's so over the top, but the fact that these people are literally at a live TV taping and their attention span is so low that they pull out books when the show that's being shot in front of them is instantly boring, that they just start, like, these all start reading. And it's not one or two, it's all of them.
And that they brought books with them to, like, it's not even, because it even though it's a TV filming thing, it reads more as like a gladiator battle.
It very much feels like an arena.
So it's like you're going to an arena to watch people get murdered, and you're like, I'm going to bring a book just in case it gets boring. Although, you know, what's funny is if this show was made now, that scene would have totally sold with everybody being on their phones.
You're 100% right. That instead of it being books, everybody would have pulled out their phone. There's no doubt on that.
Little tangent, but also kind of related to complain about something. One of the 3 screenings of Doctor Strange I was at, also no spoilers for Doctor Strange, one of the 3 screenings I was at was a influencer screening. I won't say which because I'm not going to try to call anybody specific out. Someone sitting next to me who was much younger than me. We were watching the movie. Granted, I'd seen it once before this.
Thank goodness they don't listen to our podcast, or they'd be like, why'd you call me out?
But the person next to me, who I didn't know before that day, was much younger than me and had not seen the movie yet. Anytime there was literally like maybe 10 to 20 seconds that went by that they got bored, he pulled his phone out in the movie theater to scroll TikTok during the movie. And then stuff would happen, like dialogue or an action scene would start, and then he'd be like, oh shit. He's like, what happened? I was like, you could watch the movie.
Nope.
That's happening to...
Calm down, old man Rod.
So that I think that's my boomer moment, that I'm like, I can't calculate, I can't process.
We're not even Gen X, and you keep calling us boomers, Rod.
I can't process, though, being at a movie theater, and he wasn't even on the side. Like, we were both in the middle of the middle row. Why are you here? Also, of all the movies, this movie is cut so quickly together. It's like, but how you're scrolling through TikTok in the movie? It just blows my mind. It's the one thing I'm open-minded about most things that I just couldn't process. Like, what is happening? Anyway, so bring a book out.
Speaking of just like going off from whatever the main subject was. So Longshot essentially is like, well, cancel their series. Give me my time slot back.
Yeah.
Freeze the X-Men.
Spiral doesn't stop him.
Spiral doesn't care, dude. Like, that's the one thing. If you look at Spiral's body language, she's there for the check. She literally does not give a shit. I'm convinced she doesn't care. The only one who cares in this room is Mojo.
Yeah. And Longshot, I guess.
But I feel like he's even like apathetic actor caring. It's not like he actually cares, because he's not doing it because he's trying to free people. He just wants his time slot back.
He just wants to be the star.
Right. So that results in the X-Men getting broken out of their screen cells, because I don't have a name for them.
Whatever those things are.
They fight Mojo. His big like mechanical tail gets a little messed up. And then the control room, which I don't remember if we said it at the beginning, is hanging over this entire auditorium.
And it has like a jumbotrons around it.
Yeah, they're jumbotrons, but it essentially gets cut off and crashes right onto Mojo.
And you would assume would kill him, but, foreshadowing.
I mean, we don't know enough about his physiology to confirm that, right?
Well, he's a depraved omelet.
Depraved omelet.
Can you kill an omelet?
How many eggs do you have to? I'm not going to go for the joke. There's no way I can do this where it's not going to sound shitty, so I'm just going to keep pushing through. Spiral, just again, super apathetic, doesn't care, sends the X-Men back.
Yeah, without any questions, she just pops up and she's like, here you go.
Yeah. Well, I think she's just like, well, am I still getting paid? Like, she doesn't care.
And I love it when the X-Men reappear at the TV store. Cyclops is kind of echoing what I felt watching it. It's like, can someone please tell me what just happened?
So that's a totally fair reaction. And then we do see that Mojo has survived, and we get a, very stereotypical Hollywood quote of nothing lasts forever, especially in television.
And then Longshot and Spiral are like walking away, and Longshot's hitting on Spiral.
Yes.
But it's a kind of a weird, like, kind of 90s thing where he's lightly negging her. because he makes the comments like, I was with a woman with two heads once. He was like, is that supposed to impress her or intimidate her? What kind of pickup line is that? Because she has,
I know,
several arms.
Yes, no, I understand the concept, Rod. I'm processing and thinking we should just keep going with the episode. So we get our final jump over to the Savage Land, and
because that was actually a smooth transition. Because Mojo was like, "Well, look, there's a dinosaur show," and he points at a screen.
Right, and Xavier and Magneto see this citadel in the distance. There's a little bit of acknowledgement that Magneto is responsible for that being there. And they see a woman who is fighting this dinosaur who's bipedal, green, pterosaur looking guy who we all know is Sauron. And Xavier wants to make the move to help, but Magneto stops him. And then you see Sauron uses his hypnosis powers, and basically this woman stops putting up any sort of fight, and he carries her off into the distance.
Yep. And then with the to be continued, not to be continued.
No to be
But
continued.
cliffhanger. It's weird because nothing kind of happened in this episode.
It was very much a one-off episode. If you didn't have the Xavier stuff, it could literally have been plugged in anywhere in the entire series. And I don't think those are bad things for a show. It's like, it's a little bit of the Buffy Monster of the Week thing, but there was no overarching story it had to fit in perfectly alongside.
It had the energy of a clip show, but without clips from previously, It's weird. Actually, you know what? It kind of reminds me, remember when Rick and Morty did their multiverse clip show?
Of course.
It kind of reminds me of that, where it's like, it is a clip show, but if stuff is not recycled, clips.
Right. So, interestingly enough, in Eric Lewald, what's the name of the damn book?
Previously on X-Men.
Previously on X-Men, making of the animated series, he mentions that this is definitely the odd episode out for the season. And he had no idea what the audience was thinking about at the time as they were seeing it. Because obviously there was no easy access to the internet, message boards, all that stuff was still in its infancy. I don't even think TV studios knew that people were talking about shows.
You'd only get stuff when people physically wrote in.
Right.
However long the post office took and people took to respond.
And those were angry letters almost every time.
Yeah.
Nobody ever wrote good things to studios. But he also acknowledges this is the episode that had no personal X-Men story within it.
It kind of makes me wonder if it was a bottle episode or not. Because I don't know much about animation production. Because when you actually look at the script, not much is happening story and dialogue wise and stuff.
Right.
But also, I don't know if that means it was more complicated because they had to describe a bunch of fights, or do you just script out fight scene occurs and then whoever's planning out the storyboarding deals with exploding helicopters or whatever? Because a lot of it, it was just these two get dropped into a dangerous situation and they blast their way out and then almost die, and then it cuts back to Mojo World.
Right, but he did also acknowledge that Mojo ends up being, over time, acknowledged as one of people's favorite guest villains of the show. And the piece that helped was the stakes seemed real just because of how powerful he was. And he was basically using the X-Men as toys. So, a kid with their toys, if they don't care about the toy anymore, throw out the mutant, you're killing the mutant, kind of thing. And then the only other piece of trivia that stood out to me on IMDb, so I did not confirm any of this, but the name tag on the salesman is Calamari, and the executive producer of the show, his name is Joseph Calamari.
Okay.
So again, I don't do homework on this. I look up a few things and then I put blame if it's incorrect on that. But that was kind of the Easter egg. But yeah, that's all my notes, Rod. Awesome androids, Skrulls, Jack Kirby, and Calamari.
Yeah, it was just a fun little ride. It wasn't a bad episode at all. I am a little confused how it got a higher rating than some of the other episodes we've seen that had story in it.
I mean, I look at the ratings on Moon Knight and I'm completely confused. So
wait, that it's good or bad?
It's way higher than I would have given the episodes.
I can see that. Actually, good time.
And I say this as somebody who enjoyed parts of Moon Knight. It's like a 6.5 show to me. Some of the episodes creaking at 8 or higher, it doesn't fit for me.
Moon Knight to me, and I mentioned this to you in a text, that I couldn't decide if the way it wrapped up was confusing and convoluted or clever. Judging on what other people are talking about it is a little convoluted and confusing.
My problem is I read the arguments online where people are talking about it, And their arguments of why they like it are absolutely the reasons I didn't like it. So I'm like, you and I are different wavelengths as human beings.
Taste, yeah.
Exactly.
I think at the end of the day, I had fun with the show. And so I was like, okay, so I'm not going to read too much into it. And speaking of like Mojovision stuff, fun episode, didn't amount to much. I kind of, without giving out too much personally, kind of feel the same way about Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Super fun ride. Didn't amount to a whole lot. A few things. Also, hot take here for me. I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once before Multiverse of Madness.
And up to this point, I have not watched that.
And that made Doctor Strange kind of disappointing to me. Just because it's Everything Everywhere All at Once is another multiverse story. Granted, it's not a superhero story. But I just was continuously like, it's such a great movie. I've seen it several times now. It made me compare everything from how they did multiversal travel in Doctor Strange to that. And I think if it was the other order, I still wouldn't have rated Doctor Strange as like a masterpiece, top 5 Marvel movies of all time. But I think I would have had more fun and then seen Everything Ever All at Once.
And that is relevant to this episode because I think we all have to agree the best method for multiversal travel is Spiral and her dance lasers.
Yes.
So on that note, thank you guys for joining us. If you have any thoughts, please make sure to drop them into the comments for the official Instagram post of this episode or the YouTube upload. If you like what you heard, we would appreciate a rating on the podcast app of your choice. We would really appreciate 5-star ratings, but we obviously will take 4. And if you feel like this deserves a 1, maybe don't leave it. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, CastBox, and whatever other multiversal podcast services exist. I'm sure in some world I figured out how to get us onto Facebook, even though they killed the Facebook podcast feed.
Someone tell me what a depraved omelet is.